Anybody who knows me knows that I am deeply against censorship of any kind. I don't care whether it comes from the woke left or the puritanical right. If you were trying to censor things, I deeply oppose it. Fundamentally, I don't think you have any right to tell anybody what they cannot enjoy and what they can enjoy. If I want to, go out and, watch, burlesque shows of, media properties just because it's funny, I should be allowed to do that. And clearly, currently I am. If somebody wants to go out and say everybody's a Nazi because they don't agree with them, by all means, they should be allowed to do that. Now, I'm old enough, I might not look it, but I am old enough to remember the early 2000s with the big second half of the big satanic panic with Pokemon being the big targeted thing. And I distinctly remember that it was like, oh, Pokemon is horrible. It's all about animal abuse and all this crap. And every politician wanted to be against certain video games. There was the anti Call of Duty stuff. There was the anti, Grand Theft Auto. There was all this bullshit. And that's the part of the satanic panic that I remember. The very tail end of the what I would call the second portion of it. The first portion being well before that with, anti rock and roll sentiment and, oh, rock and roll is the devil and whatever. That's really where the satanic panic, in my opinion, begins. But a bill was introduced by Mike Lee, and he introduced a bill that aims to define obscenity so that it can be more properly regulated. Well, if you're like me and you believe in free speech and you believe people should be able to go do whatever they want, say whatever they want, and the government shouldn't be stepping in and telling you what you can and cannot do as a private citizen, well, that's kind of a problem. I watch Matt Walsh every now and then just to hear what he has to say. I wouldn't call myself a fan. I think sometimes he does things I agree with. Sometimes he does things I don't agree with, as many people, would understand. Today he did something I don't agree with, and he said that this bill from Mike Lee is bad. And we're going to go over the bill, but first I want to go through and kind of talk about what, Matt Walsh says, because he's a little shady about it. So let's get to that. Got Matt Walsh here. He's going to go through and he's going to talk about this bill, and then we're going to actually go through and look at the bill so that we can see exactly what's wrong. And I'll refute what he's saying here in just a moment, but let's start with this and then let's get to everything else. So, without further ado, let's get going.
Here is a a bill that was introduced that is a very good bill. This is from the post millennial.
Like I said, not a good bill. Anything that censors anything, can't agree with it. If Matt Walsh is pro free speech, you can be anti pornography. Just don't claim to be pro free speech if you're doing it at the same time, because that's fundamentally at odds. Either you're pro censorship or you're pro freedom. In my opinion, there's two absolutes. Censoring one thing means you are removing the absolute from that freedom of speech. And when I say freedom of speech, I mean the First Amendment in its entirety. Freedom to wear what I want, freedom to say what I want, freedom to do what I want. I do not believe in any kind of censorship, and he calls that a good thing that this bill has been introduced. Now, I don't think the bill is going to go anywhere. I'm going to, right after this, go and on Monday morning, I'm going to phone up, my senators and everything, and I'm just going to be like, hey, listen, don't support this. I don't do it. This is this is anti-freedom. This is government overreach. I'm pro removal of government power. But Matt Walsh thinks this is a good thing. So let's go through and let's see what, as he says, the post millennial has to say about it, and then let's go through it ourselves so that we can look over it and actually figure out what's so wrong with it.
Senator Mike Lee, Republican of Utah, has introduced a bill that is targeted at banning online in the United States, as well as defining what obscenity is in legal terms.
So for starters, we already do have that. He's claiming that the last one is not specific enough. It's too vague, and that's a problem that he thinks that because Mike Lee's bill is incredibly unspecific, and we'll get to that. But it's already been defined. It was intentionally vague so that it can't be used to abuse First Amendment rights.
Lee, as well as Representative Mary Miller, introduced the bill called the Interstate Obscenity Definition Act.
because we really needed this, apparently.
which, if passed, would make it illegal to transmit obscene material across state lines, making large swaths of material illegal online.
Now, here's the problem with that. Where do you draw the line? By, and I will say this right now, by the wording of it, it is so unspecific. It is less specific than the other bill. We're not going to get into the old one. Just know that there's a reason that this guy feels it is that way because it's not specific enough. And I agree, it's not specific. It's not supposed to be specific. But this is banning things where the other one protects things. And that's where the issue lies. So, to be clear, what the bill would do is effectively stop you from doing anything that is deemed obscene and transmitting it in any capacity. It doesn't matter if it's physical material, doesn't matter if it's digital, doesn't matter how you transmit it. Could be, anything. Can't do it. Can't transmit, which means move it from any location to another via any means. Even it says across state lines, but internet is digital. And thus he's saying, well, can't do it via the internet either. So it's a problem. Shouldn't be allowed. And we'll keep going and we'll get into this a little bit more.
In a new release from Lee, he said obscenity isn't protected by the First Amendment, but hazy and unenforceable legal definitions have allowed extreme to saturate American society and reach countless children.
No, no, it hasn't. That's no. What are you talking about? Proof. Provide proof. No, nobody does that for some reason with these kinds of bills, because as I've said, the aim is not to protect children. It's to add governmental control over things. Sure, they always go at it with the guise of protecting children, and trust me, nobody's more about protecting children from pornography than I am, but at the expense of adults. That's where the problem lies. If I'm over the age of 18, there should not be this kind of restriction. If I am a legal adult at 18, get out of here. Leave. You have no right to be trying to enforce anything upon me when it comes to First Amendment rights. And he's claiming obscenity isn't protected. Yes, it is. What are we talking about? The very fact that I can say fuck, shit, bitch, cunt right now and transmit that over the internet means obscenity is protected. That's free speech for you. I can do whatever I want. Look, there's a reason you can't introduce these kinds of bills because it's not fair. It's not within the lines of the law. And I feel like even if this does get passed, it's going to immediately be challenged by everybody. Look, I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican. This is not a bill that deserves to be introduced. It's not a bill that deserves to be even taken seriously. There is allowed extreme pornography to saturate American society? Really? What are you talking about? And one thing I do point out is that the media coverage around this bill is actually fair and accurate from the left for a change. These left-wing sites that I usually say you can't trust these people. No, they're 100% correct this time about saying things like this bill is so vague it would make TV shows like Game of Thrones illegal. It would consider them obscene. And that's entirely accurate. And I'll explain why, but let's finish out this segment real quick.
Our bill updates the legal definition of obscenity for the internet age so that this content can be taken down and its peddlers prosecuted.
Keep in mind, internet age. Yeah, okay. Why? What's wrong with the old definition? He's not going to point out what's wrong with the old definition. Nobody's going to point it out, not even me, because there's nothing wrong with the old definition. You can go look it up. It's really convoluted and vague for a reason, and I'm not wasting my time explaining it to you, but just know that it's a protective bill, and that's why I'm okay with it, and I don't care. That's why I don't want it changed, because it allows me and companies to do things that other people will buy. You are either pro free speech or you are pro censorship. You cannot be both in a circumstance like this because it does not matter. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what you feel. If somebody is an adult over the age of 18, you should not be attempting to restrict First Amendment rights in any capacity. And you can be like Mike Lee and claim that obscenity isn't protected. It is very protected. It's like one of the second most protected things. Like you could argue that your right to protest and be against the government is protected more than obscenity and free speech. Obscenity and things like that are the fundamental of why we need free speech protections, not restrictions. This bill is unprecedented. There's nothing else that's ever passed like it. And there's a reason that those other things that we're going to talk about that are wrong with this bill, other than just adding a definition, are so horrible to free speech.
Miller also commented on the bill, saying the Interstate Obscenity Definition Act equips law enforcement with the tools they need to target and remove obscene material from the internet, which is alarmingly destructive and far outside the bounds of protected free speech under the Constitution.
We'll get into that because, yes, it does give them the tools. But those tools are not tools to remove horrible, debaucherous things. It's tools that can be used to bludgeon everybody that you don't agree with. And that's where I have an issue. I don't care if it's about protecting kids, because this isn't going to just protect kids. This is going to ruin like every adult's ability to have any of the freedom around the First Amendment when it comes to obscene things. And as I said, not okay with that.
This bill will clarify what obscenity means in the modern age, remove ambiguity around the term, and provide a standardized definition of what obscenity is. A Supreme Court case that was ruled on in 1973 made the term subjective as well as vague. And so that's what they're looking to fix.
That's where we're going to cut it off for Matt Walsh. But just know and understand that it doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point of the bill isn't to fix the definition. It's to provide a cudgel with which to beat down anybody who does something that these Puritans do not like. And let's get to that bill real quick. This is the bill as introduced today, and I'll provide a link to it. But understand that this is 3 pages. 3 pages. It's 3 pages of the dumbest attempt I've ever seen to make that cudgel available for Puritans to just walk in and just boom, whack everything they don't like. Like I said, I'm old enough to remember when this kind of bullshit existed around things like Pokemon and Call of Duty and things that this bill will absolutely start to be used to target, because of course it will. That's what they do with these. There's no restrictions in place once this kind of thing happens where anything's protected anymore. So let's get into this. To define obscenity for purposes of the Communications Act of 1934 and other purposes, be it enacted by the state and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, the short title, Defining Obscenity. In general, Section 3 of the Communications Act of 1934 is amended by redesignating paragraphs 38 through 59 as paragraphs 39 through 60, respectively, by inserting after paragraph 37 the following, and we are not going to pull that up for time's sake because these already get rambly and I don't want to make this go on any longer, but understand that this is what he wants to add and that it is referring to where it would go in reference to the prior one. The bill is directly changing prior legislation around the subject rather than adding directly new legislation, is basically what that first part there was explaining. So, obscene, obscenity. In general, the term obscene or obscenity, when used in a manner or context that explicitly refers to or could apply to picture, image, graphic image file, film, videotape, or other visual depiction, includes a picture, image, graphic file, or graphic image file, film, videotape, or other visual depiction that, and we'll get into what the sub pieces there are, but understand that basically means my Python book, if this had any kind of scantily clad women in it, would constitute pornography. Anything that's on my phone constitutes pornography. That shouldn't have been the one I wanted. This is pornography, according to this bill, because it is an image, and we'll get into what specifically counts, but my shirt, this print on this shirt could be considered a form of pornography under those definitions because it is a image of any kind, be it physical, on a film, of a graphic, any type. That's basically what it's saying. It's producing the scope of what the bill should impact, which is to say basically any kind of thing you can see with your eyes. So, let's get into what qualifies as obscene under this new term. Taken as whole, appeals to the prurient, I am reading that correctly, interest in nudity, sex, or excretion. This would qualify under that definition. It's close enough. Like I said, his bill is vague. Depicts, describes, represents an actual or simulated sexual act or sexual contact, actual or simulated normal or perverted sexual acts, or lewd exhibition of the genitals with the objective intent to arouse, titillate, or gratify the sexual desires of the person. And we'll continue on this in just a minute, but once again, this qualifies. This objectifies genitals, boobs and ass, if you qualify that. Why? Why is that so vague as to objectify? That's so vague, mind you, that by the same metric, anything qualifies. Keep in mind, walking around with your shirt off as a man could qualify under that description. Under this description, by the way, that also includes the famous Nirvana album, which already had controversy around it. That would make that Nirvana album literally illegal, like non-questionable, because to objective intent, and that's where it comes in, is you have to prove objective intent behind it. Look, the problem with that is that who determines what the intent is? Who makes that judgment? The government? I don't think they should have any right to do that. I don't think they should have any right to even introduce this bill, let alone should they have the right to determine intent. Like, hell no. Taken as a whole, like serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. There's a reason I didn't immediately scroll to the next page, because that's the part that matters. Who determines that? Who determines that my GamerSup sticker does not qualify as having any form of artistic value? Shouldn't be the government. Why do they have any right to determine what has artistic merit and what doesn't? Is a dance performance where, okay, as much as I think twerking is cringe and dumb, that where does the government get to determine if that's artistic or not? If it has any kind of value? I mean, obviously they would call a burlesque show, like the stuff that I've gone to in the past, they would call that not okay. Where does the line get drawn? And the problem is, it doesn't. This bill does not produce that, and we'll keep going through because it doesn't have any. And there's even dumber things. But to continue on here, sexual act, sexual contact for the purpose of subparagraph A, term sexual act and sexual contact have the meanings given to them in the term blah, 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 blah. Basically, if you want to look up this code, you can see what the definitions are for that, and it just back references to say, hey, when we say these two things, we specifically mean the definition as provided in this other legislation and understanding of the law. And then it goes in, says technical and conforming amendment, yada, 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 Communications Act, yada, 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 seeing blah, 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 blah. Anyway, the rest of it really just has to do with basically saying, hey, you don't have any right to call us and harass us over anything that we may say or do. I don't know why that's even there. That has nothing to do with the original intent as outlined. This entire section right there at the bottom, at the end, lines 14 to 20. Why are they even here? What does this have to do with pornography in any way? That part literally is just, we don't like it when you disagree with us, so we're going to make it illegal for you to call us and say you don't want us to do these things because it's harassing us, um, which is dumb. It's incredibly dumb. But let's take just a moment to finish this video out here while I explain a few more of the issues that this kind of thing arrives at. So, at the end of the day, to go through everything that we've just seen here, um, Puritanicals believe this is fine and acceptable because it defines a term that was apparently vague, which I disagree with. I don't think being vague is an issue. Um, and they believe that this is acceptable because it protects children at the expense of adults is the part that matters, because if you're over 18, you should have nothing of the sort being enforced upon you. That's dumb. It's entirely arbitrary. There's no reason for it to happen. It doesn't belong. This legislation is completely bullshit. And regardless if you think pornography should be outlawed, you can't introduce legislation like this and have me agree with you, because this is incredibly vague. Like I said, who decides where that line is? Who decides what's artistic and what's not? Like, if you've been around video games for a while and you've been through all the arguments that have been made against video games, one of the key arguments is, are video games art? And the answer is objectively yes. But people have been trying to make legislation around this to say no, they're not. This has no artistic merit. Call of Duty has no artistic merit. I would argue that Call of Duty is in the worst state it's ever been, but I'm not going to say that art isn't a part of that. Somebody had to design the assets for that game. Designing is art, whether you accept that or not. Somebody had to devote time to physically design that asset. That's art. There's no arguing there. There should not even be a conversation about whether or not that's art. Is there any argument to be made that this is not art? The shirt? I don't think so. I don't think you can make any argument against that. This is art. And now performative art as well. That's things like what this show was about. You know, that's all fair and dandy. Performative art is in the name. Whether you accept that it has any merit is beyond the government's, in my opinion, right to dictate. Now, I didn't watch Game of Thrones. I don't care about Game of Thrones. It doesn't interest me in any way. But I don't think that a bill like this should be allowed to say this has no artistic merit, because this bill is so generic that the line can be drawn there. That there's no reason for there to have been, tits and ass shown in any capacity. Why? Why is the bill that is claiming to fix the vagueness of the last one being introduced with deliberate vagueness and implying that the government should be allowed to do something about this? Also, by the way, remember how the the guy Mike Lee was saying in his quoted piece that the bill provides tools? No, it doesn't. It just defines it and makes it an actionable thing. So this bill is the tool. Technically, it doesn't create anything. Law enforcement doesn't get anything new to work with. They just get this bill so that already existing law now applies to this as well, and it just is wrong. It's not okay. People understand when you say certain things are wrong, and I think this is an instance where not everybody's going to be immediately understanding what's wrong with this, because it's introduced in such a way by Mike Lee that it's hard to say you take an issue with obscenity being illegal. Because at first glance, okay, yeah, I don't have any problem with that. If something is just pointlessly obscene, I mean, okay, maybe that should be, looked on critically. I don't think it should be illegal in any capacity, But I think that there are circumstances where in the protection of children, I can understand that. This bill isn't for that though. This bill has nothing to do with protecting children. As you can clearly see, children aren't mentioned in this bill at all. There was no point where and I'll scroll, back up here and make sure that I'm not, misunderstanding it, but I don't remember them explicitly saying anything to do with children. No, I'm entirely correct. There's nothing to do with children in this bill. So if this bill aims to protect children, why are they not referenced? If the bill is specifically for what he's claiming, they should be named in the bill because it should be in reference to children. If that was the intent of the bill, why isn't it in the bill? And obviously the reason is because it has nothing to do with children. The bill never had anything to do with children in the first place. It's just to produce the cudgel to beat down anybody they don't like. As I said, there's legislation being introduced already that does this sort of thing. There's legislation coming from Texas right now, as much as it pains me that that's where it's coming from, because I want to like Texas, but this kind of thing makes me go right back to thinking that, yeah, these are lunatics, and I'm kind of somewhat glad I left. That legislation would basically outright ban anime, is what it does. And I mean, I watch and enjoy anime, as do a lot of people. What right does the government have to be making this kind of legislation? And once again, that legislation is very similar to this one in that it plays into the obscenity and protecting children part of it. Why? What's the fucking point? There isn't one. It's entirely arbitrary, and the government's not doing that at all. It's just to get rid of things that they don't like. Look, I'm sorry, but at the end of the day, this bill is horrible. It negatively impacts everyone, not just children, and is primarily impacting adults. Children aren't being deliberately exposed to pornography. Not only that, children aren't interacting with this sort of thing. When I go out in public, I make a deliberate effort. Ooh, that's bright and blinding. I make a deliberate effort to hold my phone so this is on my leg, in my pocket. It's against my leg. Can't see it, right? So when I pull it out, can't see it. I make a deliberate effort at that. Unless I'm around friends, nobody's seeing this. And I'm an adult. I'm not exactly hanging around children often enough where I'm worried about this. I mean, sure, if I'm walking down the street in public, but like even then, kids have probably gone to the beach. They've probably seen somebody with their shirt off before. They've probably seen, women in bikinis. Like, where's the line drawn? Why? Why is this an argument? Look, I'm all for protecting kids. I try not to swear around kids. I do all the I'm try is the optimum word here. I try to be a good influence for kids. But when it comes to the expense of other people portion of these kinds of things, my acceptance goes entirely away, right out the window. So, hey, maybe this will fall on deaf ears and nobody's going to see it. But at the end of the day, I'm making this video because it's something I'm passionate about. I think everybody should go and check out this bill and read it for themselves, see that I'm not lying to you, go see what's happening here and not be okay with it. I mean, maybe you totally disagree with me. Maybe you think, oh, this is fine. This should happen. But I don't agree with you. And you're not going to convince me otherwise. Like I said, I was around for the tail end of the first satanic panic around Pokemon and Call of Duty and violent video games. And I've been around for these arguments about what is and is not artistic in reference to lewd and obscene anything. But the government has no right, in my opinion, to step in and make this kind of action. And I staunchly oppose it. With that said, I will see all of you another time. До свидания, arrivederci, good day.